In my last video, I said that I was going to do two films. One about setting up your camera ready to go and shoot a gig or in a theatre. And I said the second one would be about practicalities about shooting in the gig or a theatre environment. And I realised that the two things are sufficiently different that I'm going to do a film for each. So this week we're going to talk about shooting at a gig environment. Roll credits? No, roll VT. There you go. So the first thing I should say is last week I talked about setting up your camera, and I said the first thing that you should do is set for RAW, and didn't really explain why. And that comes down to being able to change the white balance in post-production. And really what your camera is trying to do is, in any particular lighting environment, is to try and find a neutral colour cast to suit the environment. And in a gig environment that changes all the time because of the strobing and the colour casting. So essentially I suggest you just set your white balance to something like cloudy or something closer to tungsten, and then expect that in post-production you're going to have to change it all. The other thing that I didn't talk about last week is the exposure triangle and getting light into your camera. And I'm sort of assuming that if you're on this channel you sort of understand that, but let me just do a quick recap. When you're in a dark environment, like a gig, you've got to try and make sure as much light gets to the into your camera as possible. And there are three ways of doing this. The first one is the speed of your shutter. The second one is the size of the aperture in your lens, and the third one is the sensitivity of your sensor. So, and that's called the ISO. So, when you're at a gig, you're trying to capture people as sharp as possible, and therefore you're trying to make sure the shutter speed is quite high, 250, 160th. So you're going to need as wide an aperture as possible, and you're going to need a high ISO, and I recommended a 6400 ISO and as wide a shutter as possible. So this is a prime lens at 1.4, and it means that as much light as possible can go through and be recorded on the sensor, and that means that you can have a higher shutter speed. So, going to a gig, what's the practicalities of doing this? Well, first off, unless you're a professional photographer and you have a press pass, you are not allowed to bring a camera in to take professional photographs, which is a challenge if you want to do it anyway. So the thing that you need to do is get a small rig, and this is what I take. So a small mirrorless camera. This is an X-Pro1, very old camera, but it does the job. Small body, and then two primes. This prime is a 35mm. Actually, I'd quite like one with a 50mm, which is the equivalent of an 85mm on a full frame camera. But this I take for individual shots of players. And then a wide angle. This is a 18mm, which I suppose on a full frame is about a 24mm, and it's good for taking a wide shot of the entire band. I don't use the X-Pro1 any longer because I now have an XT3, which has about the same body size, so I bring that in. And so what you can do is you simply hang your camera over your shoulder, put your jacket on, zip it up, nobody knows any the better, and this fits snugly into one of your pockets. So you can get your camera past the doorman. Job done, number one. So the next thing that you've got to do is get to the front. So it means turning up early for the gig, trying to get in as early as you can, and rather than having a look at the merch desk, buying your beer, etc., just go straight down the front. You are going to be pleased because your gig experience is better. You also get better shots. The other thing that does is it gives you an opportunity to test out your settings once the support app comes on. Now, it means that you've got half an hour to be able to check your settings, take pictures to try and set that up. So, you set your white balance, you set your ISO at 6400, you've opened up your aperture as wide as possible, and then you start taking pictures of the support band and checking the exposure. So start at 1/250th, move it up if you can afford it, take it down if you're not getting sufficient light into the camera. What that does is it gives you that half an hour to really check out the settings. Is your white balance the most appropriate for the various colours on stage, and really try and change around. Keep on checking your sensor, check your histogram. The last two things that I'm going to suggest is that you learn about who you're going to go and see. Where does the guitarist stand? Where does the bass player stand? Do they have a keyboard player? Who stands where on stage? Because when you get on and you go and jump at the front of your stage and you think you're set up exactly right to capture the lead singer, and then they change the setup for the support act, your lead singer comes on and he's standing on the other side of the stage. Big problem if that's what you were trying to take. So learn about how the band is set up on stage, or most likely to set up on stage, so that you can be in the right place, and find out how they hold their guitars and which way they tend to look when they're singing. That way you'll be most likely to be able to position yourself for the best position. And the last thing I'd suggest is that you change things up. Yeah, you want to get good pictures of all of the members of the band, so you're using your longer prime lens. Once you're happy with some of those pictures, I would recommend changing up to your wide-angled prime, getting good pictures of the band, and then changing your perspective. So shooting from higher, shooting with your hands above your head, shooting blind, or unless you've got a flippy screen, you might be able to use that. And then going from one side of the stage to the other side of the stage and getting a random set of shots which gives a better idea about the whole experience. Going to the back of the room, taking a shot that captures all of the crowd as well. And if you can, sort of get behind the stage a little bit, at the side of the stage, and shoot forward. So you're shooting at the back of the band and trying to capture the people's reaction. All of those make for great pictures. So change your perspective, change your lenses up, have a great time, and then once you feel that you've got a bunch of good pictures, put your camera away and enjoy the gig. I hope this has been helpful, and if you enjoyed it, please subscribe. It makes a big difference, and I hope to see you again soon. Thanks very much. There's one other thing that I forgot to say, which is, particularly if you haven't been able to get a high shutter speed, is to wait for stops in action. The lights flash around and then settle. That's when you take the picture. You wait until the singer, who is flailing all over the place having a great time, and then stops moving. You may wait until they're holding a large note. That's when you get the picture. You have to wait until there is stops in action such that you can capture them sharp. Well, you can set your camera up to just, multiple shooting, continuous shooting, but I don't think that's much fun. I want to wait until I think that I'm going to get the picture and then grab it then. I find it much more rewarding. That's it. Thanks a lot.